As we continue towards unlocking and focus on making an economic recovery, some of the key trends that emerged during the lockdown may be here to stay. Trends that have meant growth and opportunity for some sectors and businesses. This is even as other sectors have seen such massive disruption that they're on the verge of an existential crisis. Now, online education has definitely emerged stronger during this period of the lockdown. On the Media Dialogues today, we're going to look at that experience via a new brand called Upgrad. It was started in 2015 as an online platform for higher education. It says gross student revenue for the month of June was 50 crore rupees, and currently approximately 100,000 learners are logged in to the platform. The man behind this is Ronnie Screwvala, who we know as a veteran film and TV producer and more recently as an investor. He's a man who wears many hats. Ronnie, good to have you on the show. Thank you very much for talking to us.
Always nice to have a chat with you, Anurag. Go ahead.
So here's the thing. Everybody has been busy in this lockdown, working overtime. So have you, I'm sure. But unlike many other people, would it be right to say that for Upgrad, your latest venture, it has been a huge opportunity that the lockdown has unlocked?
I wouldn't over-dramatize it with a huge without underselling the opportunity. All I would say is today there has been incredible amount of evangelists. There's a sense of urgency. Education is counter-cyclical. When people actually go through a challenge and a problem and feel their jobs a threat, they turn to learning more. And that's been the good part about it and the strong part about it. There's still a fair share of insecurity. I think everyone feels the worst is still to come. And I believe in that too. And therefore, there's a sense of hesitation and trepidation of making these long-term commitments also. But overall, I think if there was something we could do in 4 years, now, given the last 3 months, we think we can do it in 2.
I like the way you've described the psyche of the people who are signing on. And also, Ronnie, give us a sense of what kind of demographic we are talking about, given that these courses or these programs across 9 different areas currently, and you're going to add on more from what I've been hearing, are, about what, an average ticket price of $1 lakh a course, between 7
No, so I
to
think at Upgrad,
11
2
months?
parts really. I think at Upgrad, we're looking at lifelong learning, which means we want people to join us when at the age of 18, and then we want them to be lifelong learners all the way till 48. And that doesn't mean we disrespect people at 50 and 52. I'm just putting that as a range there.
Sure.
And we believe that today, more than ever, every 3 to 4 years, you'll have to, in some way, upgrade. And that's why we call ourselves Upgrad. The average ticket size, to answer your question, is about 2.5 lakhs rupees. And with a low of 1 lakh and a high of 5 lakhs, because these are deep learning courses. This is not short-term, go in there, learn for 1 month courses. There's a fair amount of homework you need to do. You need to devote at least 10 hours a week to that. The good part about this is that you can continue your job and then continue your learning process. And that actually means that even though our ARPU or our costs are about an average of 2.5 lakhs, compared to the offline version, which would be about 10 to 15 lakhs, if you count the lodging and boarding, the shifting of residence, the actual fees, and 1 year of no salary.
There's some figures that you've shared, and I believe that, for the month of June, the gross student revenue came in at 50 crores, as a result of which you're expecting this to be about 100 crores in September, and as a result of which, by the end of this financial year, 1,200 crores. Now, the question is, how does this compare to the previous year, and how does this June compare to the previous June, in order to understand what the lockdown has meant?
So I think March 2020, we had a sort of a overall, what I would call a quarterly rate of about 85 to 100 crores in terms of a quarterly rate. And that is actually going up to 300 crores by Jan, Feb, March of 2021. So that you're seeing a threefold jump, basically.
I want to delve a little bit deeper into the psyche of the people who are signing on. What are the anxieties that you're hearing, and what areas are they seeking to upgrade their skills in or add on to their knowledge base?
So I think anxieties first is an anxiety of uncertainty. And that I think is a terrible one for most people, because it's about the fear of the unknown. So when there's anxiety and there's fear, I think it's bad news that you don't have a job, but it's sad to say that that is a certainty to it. But I think the biggest is the element of, is tomorrow going to be worse than today? I think the second one is therefore preempting, how do I be part of the top 50% of the workforce so that my job, my career, my growth is going to be a little bit more secure if the job market and the overall, not just the job market, but I think today everyone in companies are so busy fixing supply that we haven't really given a thought to whether demand will come back.
Yes.
So I think first everyone's trying to get back to business, and then we're going to fix demand, except the demand is not in your hands to fix, it's in the hands of the consumer to fix. And during this period, if their share of wallet of their discriminatory spending or their non-discriminatory spending moves around, which it has to and it will, demand in many sectors will change. And therefore, what jobs will be out of date is the second level of uncertainty that people feel. That which are the sectors that will be so damaged that they will, as you said in your opening comments, starting from scratch or recalibrating what they may have done for 2 years, 5 years, and 8 years of their life. So that's the second part where I think there's a sense of uncertainty. And therefore, the element of wanting to tank up, but not knowing what to tank up on, is where the disclarity comes on.
What are the areas that you think they should tank up on, given that you have been doing deep conversations with industry leaders, given that Upgrad has been connecting or doing career placements as well? So what is it that young people need to look at when, in terms of the kind of time and money that they invest in terms of the returns that this brings them?
So I would wear this with both my hats. I mean, with an Upgrad hat on, but also being a first generation entrepreneur hat on. See, I think there's a pursuit for certificates, diplomas, and degrees, and there is what we call the deep learning experience. But I think today, more than ever, India also needs the knowledge-based economy and what I would call the knowledge-based learning and the soft skills learning. And we lack that substantially overall. So I think a strong realization has to come with people that they really want to progress in life. Their soft skill learning will have to come along with their hard skill learning while they're preempting the careers of tomorrow. So that's just, I want to harp on the element of soft skills because most people, and I mean every part of it, I think the reason why even after you get hired, your company feels you're not job ready and then needs to give you another 3 months of learning needs to have a reflection. The very fact that you can do a phenomenal course and then you're fail in 6 interviews is either a communication skill or an interview skill or your ability to be able to communicate and whatever else. This is going to get more important in 2021 and 2022 than ever before. On the context of careers, I think the element of the careers of tomorrow, I think today the base of what we do, for example, in data, because we think that actually data is not just about, it's about everything to do with a core area where more and more decision-making, more and more marketing decision-making, more and more where money goes is all going to happen in those elements. So there'll always be the careers of tomorrow. There's also the element where even a thing like an MBA today has graduated to an MBA in business analytics and an MBA not just in HR or marketing or finance as it was before. So there's the evolution of that. And then when you look at your actual degree course, we're finding that a lot of people got into the workforce at a very early stage in their life because for socioeconomic reasons, they needed to start working
as soon as you can,
But now today, when you can do that in a blended version of online, you can continue your job. Otherwise, if you've lost that cycle of that event of being an undergrad or a graduate, you've lost it for life, according to you, no longer. Today, you've got to figure out how you're going to be in the top 50 percentile of your workforce, because that doesn't make you risk-free, but there is going to be a lot of turmoil in the bottom 50%, not just bottom 50% from a performance point of view, a competence point of view, redundancy point of view, and shrinking of the job market because of shrinking of demand point. The job opportunities could be in your same company, except you'll need to be a lot more rounded. That is another important criterion because not every job opportunity means you need to find another fresh job. That's going to be even twice or even 3 times more difficult. But I think if you look at your own career and your own company and say, here's a future, and how do I upskill or upgrade myself, that is going to be a good low-hanging fruit for people to look at.
You've been monitoring what's going on. What is the kind of economic recovery that you're saying, that you're seeing happen? Because, you know, a lot of people have been talking about the kind of economic recovery we'll see. We've all been hearing about the V-shape and the U-shape. and the W shape. So what are you seeing? How do you see India and the Indian economy get out of where we are today?
No, I don't see it in any alphabets at all. And those are really nice to sort of make a context. But I think today we have to be quite realistic about the fact that consumer demands will change. Spending, people are going to look at demand in a very different manner for different sectors and different contexts. Some of them will be because, see, we're in the in-COVID area. We're not in the post-COVID area.
Yes.
So we have to break up what is in the in-COVID area and the post-COVID area.
Yeah.
And so in the COVID area, which could last, magically everyone has this 18-month timetable. I don't know where and how it came about, that 3 months are over and there's another 15 months before some sense of a cure comes in there. And that's if the bad news in Mongolia and China about the bubonic plague
Yes.
does not become even of a bigger element. But let's assume that we're not in Armageddon space and the world will come back to some sense of sanity. I think the question here is about how are we going to be able to get demand back? And I think it's going to be a slow process, if you ask me today. I think people are not feeling poor, but they're feeling poorer.
Right.
And I think element of recalibrating how you're going to spend the 100 rupees that you have in your wallet is going to get more and more important and more critical. And look, countries like India offer incredible opportunities, but we're not like the United States of America, where you can put $2 trillion into the economy and everyone's got some sense of a dole, grant, or subsidy. And I think it is the job of the political parties and of the leadership in the political to actually look at the bottom of the pyramid, the 600 million people that don't have a destiny within their control.
Yes.
So India, I think, is going to be broken up on that 1.3 of the 600 to 700 million who are not in control of their own destiny, who are the daily wage worker, plus were already in rural India. For that, we'll have to look at it much more socialistically, which means that the pressure on the top 600 million people who are in control of their destiny, but still are on white collar, blue collar approach,
Yes.
are going to feel a bigger pinch because
Right.
they're not in grant, they're not in dole, they have to fend for themselves, and it's going to get tougher.
As an investor, as someone who has been an entrepreneur, is an entrepreneur, has been investing in entrepreneurs and startups, what do you see this ecosystem doing to the startup spirit and entrepreneurship?
Startup spirit, I think it should do incredible amount. More now than ever. If I think in the education and in upgrad, what we wanted to do in the next 4 years, we can do in 2. I think for entrepreneurs, yes, the next 6 months, let's not rush into things. But the opportunities that are going to be there, because the fluff is off. You know, the fluff is off. That means you can start really building serious businesses. And let's face it, there's going to be a lot of opportunity with a lot of incredible talent that you're going to be able to get, where you can bring them on. And people are looking for entrepreneurship to solve the job problem here. We're looking at sectors that will solve the job problem. I'm a firm believer that unless we have the next wave and a tsunami of entrepreneurship, that's also going to contribute substantially. And this is not the startup ecosystem that we've looked at. So I think it's a great and incredible opportunity. And I don't mean that in a facetious manner. I think the expectations for everyone to say that I can't start unless I get a lot of funding, that's
going to change, right? That's gone.
It's not gone, but I think everyone needs to be objective. It was never there to that extent. It was there for a few people who could spin a good story and build a business and were fortunate enough to be in the right place, the right time. That badge of honor is not needed by everyone. And I think we'll create incredible opportunities. There's going to be a fair amount of local demand that can surge for the right opportunities. Don't look for the glamorous businesses only. Don't go where the herd goes, because when you follow the herd, you're only looking at the backside of somebody in front of you. And that's not inspiration.
That's a good way of saying it, Ronnie. Okay, Upgrad is something that you've created 5 years ago or started 5 years ago. How come you haven't gone out and done a splashy brand building campaign like many other businesses in the online space? What is the role of marketing in today's digital economy, which has got sealed even further with the experience of COVID-19 and the lockdown?
But we think feliciously and absolutely wrongly that a flashy flashy campaign is equal to brand. You don't build brands by building campaigns. You don't build brands by necessarily. That's an awareness.
A lot of people get to know who you are quickly.
Yes, so you're building awareness, but real brand is when people connect with you, and then you get into an entire
Yes, of
element where
course.
you're going to have repeat customers and whatever else.
Yes.
But I think what we've not done in terms of having, into inverted commas, as you said, flashy advertising campaigns and awareness is because actually the kind of core we are looking at is a very large. We're actually reaching out to 100 million people. But I think the first 2, 3 years for us was to really build the credibility with the universities that we partner with, credibility with the working professionals, and most important, credibility with the organizations. The people will future hire them.
Right.
And what this last 3 months of the pandemic has done is allowed universities to have the penny dropping moment that yes, online is credible, the learning experience is deep, and for corporates to feel that a CV with someone saying I did a course online is no longer humming and hawing. So that I think has changed quite desperately. In India, television is viewed as when you get on television or you get on cricket, then you arrive. And I think each company has to find its own context. If you're not in heavy fundraising mode to manage perceptions more than the reality, you do whatever you think is needed. That doesn't mean that we won't. We will at the right opportune stage. When we feel the critical mass is ready to absorb that when I've got the range of products that I have to, in such a mass approach,
I get it.
that will absorb a television campaign.
Rani, I want you to now take off this hat and wear another one, and that is one which was your first avatar as a public figure to most of us, isn't it? Which is not your magic lantern days. I'm not going that far back, but I'm talking about television.
But my media days.
You know, I'm talking about UTV, I'm talking about production, TV production, film production, of course, before you, exited
so you want me to wear my
selling to
media
Disney.
hat? Okay,
Look
happy to
at
do
the
that.
disruption that's happened in that sector. How are you seeing what is happening there, given that movies are releasing, on streaming services, as a result of which for some time, till the movie halls open again, you lose out on a complete revenue stream. The streaming services are beginning to behave differently, getting more mass in their approach in terms of the content that they're going after. Production, the way a movie is produced, and I'm sure, you're back in the movie business with RSVP Films. Tell me what you're seeing as the big changes that are going to remain once lockdown is opened.
Specifically when it comes to movies, I think the charm there is that it's not a situation which is a pipeline, right? So there are individual creative people who, for them, the calendar is not that important. It's sad that a 6-month period there'll be no, but I see this, I think we're over dramatizing the whole OTT versus the going to the movie theater experience. Right now, for the next 1 to 1.5 years, nobody's going to go to the movie theaters. And I say nobody means not absolutely nobody, but nobody to make it a viable business. Because if I'm, to say that I have a 30% occupancy and therefore what's the big deal? Anyway, 70% was free. So is a foolhardy story.
So you're saying 1.5 years you see before normalcy comes back to movie going in the traditional theater manner.
Yeah, I mean, don't you? Doesn't anybody? I mean, are you going to be indoors? Can you watch a movie with a mask on and with gloves on? I don't think so. That's not an experience you're going to the movie theater for. But and it has to be a national release and an international release. And this is the global pandemic. So for the big movies, the challenge is if I can't get to Mumbai and Delhi, I'm not going to do it in a smaller city. I'm going to have to do a national release.
So what does that mean for productions? What does that mean for the kind of content that will get greenlit? What does that mean for the kind of stories that will be told and the budgets that they'll be made in?
The cycle for movies does take 16 to 18 months. So I think what has happened is, to be honest, what I can see is the development work and the focus on development work in the last 4 months has been incredible. But that output we'll see in 2022. We won't even see it in 2021.
Right.
I think the other part is that after people come back to the movies, if restrictions have been raised, but in small numbers, I think the small numbers will make the model a little bit more unviable because you still have your fixed cost and then you're going to have this low intake. So that's the other problem. And then there's going to be a drought in the middle of next year because nothing got shot from March, and I may not get shot till December. Everyone thinks they're going to start shooting in September. I think it might be December. So if for 9 months nothing is shot, you're going to have a drought in next year because there's going to be no rush for people to go to the weekend theaters. I see some theoretical discussions where people will see, the small movies will suffer. Not at all. People will be dying for any kind of content there because there's not going to be that kind of lineup. But I do think in 100 years we can write off a year and a half and still not have permanent damage to storytelling, because I think cinemas is an important window. It is not an either or with OTT. I think stories will be evergreen. Yes. And yes, for 1.5 years, I mean, hotels have written out 1.5 years of occupancy. So do we have to do that in cinema?
As a producer today, our producer is saying thank God for the streaming services, because at least that is a window where you can put your material out. And thanks to so many of them being in the market, at least what you can get in terms of values will be competitive.
Look, I would say that in any case, streaming videos have been around for the last 2 years. Yes. And outside of the fact that you're now given it as a premiere for which you get a little bit more of a price. Yes. In any case, for the last 1.5 years, it had buoyed up the industry because you had one good window. You had theatrical, you had television. Originally, you had home video and DVD, and now you had digital. So it was already there in a robust window. The incremental benefit for premiere versus non-premiere is temporary.
Ronnie, I'm going to change the mood completely. You are a self-made man. Whatever you've achieved in life is something that you have done with your being able to spot opportunities, being able to put in the hard work and convert those opportunities into success. We are speaking at a time when there is a raging debate about nepotism in the movie business that you know so well and that you've broken into years ago. And this nepotism debate, of course, has also spilled over and is a very prevalent in all other sectors, right? But the debate is raging in the movie business because of that unfortunate demise of Sushant Singh Rajput, the actor who actually made a debut in a film, Kai Po Che, which was produced by your company. I want you to weigh in on exactly how you see what is being discussed here from your perspective, and also because you are dealing with young people and their aspirations in trying to get ahead in life.
You know, I would not be able to weigh in because, frankly, let's be very clear. It is an absolute tragedy, and it is a very personalized situation for a family in that context. Yes. I don't think anyone can logicalize something as that.
Absolutely.
I mean, from what I understand, I've never felt in a context of depression and suicidal, and I feel blessed with that thought process. But I can imagine that when you feel that way, there is an intuitiveness to what you want to do, and to discuss what that impulsive, intuitive decision was at that time and put that into a generality to make it sound like, was there a trigger, I think would be inappropriate. And social media allows that, but I don't think it's fair for anyone to cast a shadow on both sides. It really doesn't add up and make sense. Nepotism in a sector is like politics in a company. It's like losing a job somewhere else. It's like competition and a very competitive, where somebody comes in there and actually feels, first, my best competitive strategy is decimate everyone else in the business, and then I can grow. These are all real life situations that we all face on a day-to-day basis. So I'm not an expert to be able to comment on it in whichever way. I think we had a phenomenal relationship. I really deeply regret, because Sushant did his very first movie, Kai Po Che, with us, and then we more recently did both Kedarnath and Sun Chidiya.
Yes.
And at all those times, his optimism was incredible, absolutely incredible. So deep sense of regret, but I don't think verdicts need to be passed by anyone.
I hear you on that, and the point you make quite lucidly. But if we were to pull out of that and talk about the fact that whether it's in social media or otherwise, young people now seem to consider nepotism as being a huge barrier in their ability to get ahead, no matter what industry. Do you want to just address, like, give closing words on how to overcome these kind of challenges on which you have no control?
I'm a product personally of not the degree approach. I'm a product of more the soft skills approach. And therefore, what do I mean by that? I think one needs to fall back on self-motivation most of your life. That's the only way you're going to get through a lot of challenging times, abysmal failures, feeling the abyss, both in your personal life sometimes or in your work life. Self-motivation is a very important asset that each one needs to do. And I think that's very important. That's the best I can say at this time.
Okay, Ronnie, on those words, I'm going to say thank you very much for joining us on this
show.
You. Wish you good luck. And hopefully we'll do a conversation face-to-face, Ronnie. Don't get too comfortable with these Zoom links, huh?
I think it's very efficient in any case, and it is face-to-face.
I knew you would say that.
And there's so much left to imagination outside of face-to-face, so that's even better.
All right, thank you. Stay safe.
All right, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. We'll be back again with another conversation on the Media Dialogue, so do look out for that. And stay tuned to CNBC TV 18 for all the news and analysis as it happens.